So today we are going to look at how to create this effect, little variations on these effects. I think this is really well done, and we're gonna look how to achieve this with different aspects in 3D and 2D way, so you can combine these effects. But essentially, I found another way where this is kind of used in Apple event, so it's extremely well done, and we can use various ways on how to do these. So let's jump inside, and we're gonna start by entering Spline. But before that, I would just talk about the camera a little bit. So we usually tend to work in perspective mode, and when we have a cube, we tend to look at it from a 3D perspective. So when I, glide around the object, and if I go and make this camera minus 90, so pointing downwards, and then 0, 0 out everything, and 0 this one out, and I'm just gonna make this a 0, 2, lift it up a bit. Now I see the cube represented in 2D way, but not exactly. Because if I, for example, do spline, so if I look at it in a way that I have a multiple objects there, or I have some element that will actually tell me. So let's say I do this flower, and I'm gonna make it in XZ space. So it's lay flat, and I have my camera from the top. Then I can put plane and make it, I don't know, 1000. We can go even more, and maybe 50. And then I can press ND to reveal. And you see the width, it's quite long. So let's increase those width segments. So just so we get like some nice definition there. I can do 2000 segments, and then we don't need any segments in height. And I can then go into the spline wrap. So I have it here. I can press Shift, click on a spline wrap. It will become a child, and then it's asking me to insert a spline. So I can insert that flower. Now I have immediately this spline wrapped around. I've wrapped the plane. So now I have the plane wrapped around the spline, and I can go to rotation tab on the spline wrap, and I can set up vector of Y to 1. So it doesn't matter what number you put here. It's actually you just choosing the up vector. So if this is 0, if this is 1, then this is actually what is it now. And if it's Z, a 1, it won't do thing because the way it's wrapped, it just works in Y, and this is what we want. But now you can notice that in this representation, it's not fully flat. I can see the inside of that object. So when I want to be looking at it in a 2D fashion, I need to go into my camera and switch it to top or orthographic view. And if I'm in orthographic view, I can see this same 3D object represented in 2D way. So I don't have a focal length anymore. So you notice when you're in perspective, you have a focal length like a full camera setting. But when you go into orthographic, it's the same way. You would just zoom in, zoom out, because there is no focal length. As if I look at this camera, it has boxy view. So the regular camera doesn't have that. But here you can see the camera straight away starts with the box projection. So it's a parallel projection of those two, basically those two view modes on the camera. So it's our HD kind of 16:9 projection downwards, and we get that basically look. Essentially, that's how we achieve that 2D look in 3D space. So now I have spline wrapped, and I can actually create the material. So I put a standard material on a plane, and I'm going to make it emissive. So emission, and turn on the IPR. So apply the material to the plane, go to the emission tab, increase the emissions, and in orthographic way, you again not going to see it because there's nothing to represent that in 2D space. So there's no through reflection. I can see the material if I'm in perspective, but if I go into the through orthographic, then I really, in that parallel projection, I don't see anything. The way we gonna get that, we can create plane that will be reflecting that. So I'm gonna go at ground and I'm gonna jump out of the camera, and you can see this is now being reflected. So what do we see is the reflections, and we have some sort of like that. So I'm just gonna look at the plane. I can even reduce the amount it's sticking out a little bit. So something like this, and jump back into that view. And now I need to make that plane invisible. So the way I can create this standard material, I can just put it on the ground and make it reflection just sort of darkish, and this make black, but then I kind of don't see that, but then I kind of don't see that effect again. So what I found out is to increase the metalness, and once you increase the metalness, then you get that effect. And if I go into the spline and increase the shine through, and oh, it's too early. Let's just go back to that metalness and just kind of make it a little bit more obvious. And I'm just going to increase the roughness. And when I increase the roughness, the more I increase the roughness, I see that the light travels further because it's reflecting. If I decrease it, I can see really just tiny lines, almost like drawn by pencil. But there's still a problem. We don't see much reflection because we use no lighting in the scene. So we can introduce dome light that will completely flush the scene. So I remove the background, and then also, even though it's not needed in this case, and I reduce the exposure to very low and also change the color to black. And now if I go back to this material, I can introduce the roughness. I can still see no ground, but I see now our reflections. So this is the foundation. I'm going to go to camera, zoom out a bit, and I'm just going to make sure we have it like that. So we go in here and look our material setting. We can give it some color just by introducing a ramp. So we're going to go and put ramp in, and that ramp we plug into our emission color. So as we increase the emission, now we can control the color. But if I put different color here, you're not going to see any change because that color is actually on the bottom of this ramp. So purple. So all you need to do is to go into that ramp and switch it to horizontal. And now we cooking. So I have this color projection. We can make some interesting color palettes. So I'm just going to go here. And I also use bloom to kind of exaggerate that effect of the shining. So if I go threshold and then intensity a lot, so I can go here and we can increase finally that emission to 6. Reduce the softness. So something dial it like just the way you like it, just so it's blooming a little. And when we saw the colors on the frame IO and stuff like that, you see you can really start playing with the way that gradient is working, and you don't see any 3D projection, you just see the line. So this is thanks to the orthographic projections of that camera. And now let's look how we can control the behavior of that plane being spline wrap. So we have a couple of options here. One of the things is offset. So we can be offsetting where it is the start of that spline. And we can also be offsetting how much we want to be spline wrapping of that plane on that spline. So that was a crazy sentence. But there's even one more interesting thing, that we can control the size from the beginning to the end. So if you put size at the start all the way to 0, you get thinner line that is, going up and thick. But if I drag all the way down, even the end, then it's good. I have seen nothing. That makes sense. It's all zeroed out. So I put in the middle. So here at number 5, I'll just put Control click and drag it back up. And then I get thinned ends. I can extrude this. So holding Control to stay in line with that. And same here, holding Control. So to create some sort of thin to thick effect, which will play nicely if we do that like from, and it's just kind of drawing. So it seems to be, it's kind of rising, and then we can play with the offset. It's drawing all the effects much nicer than if we would do it just with single size thickness. So this is all good. What other options we have, that we can do? We can, let's say, we call this top center, and then we can create another camera that we call top, and we call detail, and we can jump into that camera, just kind of zoom in. We're actually controlling this one, so that's fine. Just gonna zoom in a lot, and we can animate simple. So if I go here, I'm just gonna animate it that we go into spline wrap and we go from 0. We go from 0, it will start drawing. So I'm just gonna go to our frame 0, press keyframe, go to the frame 40 and make it like that, like 40%. This is just random numbers I'm throwing here. And then we go to frame 80. I'll just keep 40% still. And then at the end, we'll finish it to 100%. That's our final logo. That's actually, I went over, it's a good example where I'm stacking the plane more than 100%. I'll just get these jaggedy jack. So stick to 100%, and you may have to control your plane length and stuff like this. But this is perfect. And here, when this is growing, we can make this even travel. So I can animate offset until, some frame where I want it to travel a bit. So let's say over here. And then if I see it, like how it's projecting, so it travels, and then it stops traveling and it finishes itself off. So we have this kind of basic animation of like what we want to do. And one of the good things about this setup that you can essentially go into your logo. So if I go into Figma, I'm just going to steal my logo. I just export this as SVG and call it desktop, and then bring in, for example, vector import, and bring in that vector. And I'm just going to make it flat. So I'm just going to rotate it in pitch -90 and make it large. So I'm just going to match it to our view. So this is my logo, and you can do path spread. So be careful about that, because that path spread will kind of affect the Z space of that spline. So this needs to be to 0. Extrude depth, you don't need it at all. And layer offset 0. So this is something that we can use. I'm just going to go into spline settings, make it like 1%. So it's more defined spline. And I'm going to go and press C. And now I just get these two splines. So one is one because like we have separated that logo. So I'll just take these two splines and I'm just gonna highlight them and connect objects. I will create another spline. So I'll delete those two. And now I have a spline of my object. So I can delete now this, call it HKA logo. And this logo I can then put into spline wrap. And now I'm essentially animating my logo within the same animation that I used before. So it's extremely fast way how to generate like cool effects. You know, you create one setup once, you animate it, and then you're just replacing objects within the scene. You can reduce this effect. So you can play with that spline as well. How it behave with control. So super cool effects. And now when we go back into that detail, we can just kind of travel around and find out, you know, like some cool moments where you just go like this and we see how it travels around and we get cool effects just being drawn out here. And we can use that for our video. You can start with these. If I go into my project render for like a wide view, you can see I'm rendering these, and we can switch to full view. So at the end, we should finish with the full logo. I might actually fix this a little bit. I'm just gonna do it again here. So yeah, so we have that, and we have a rotation here, and we don't really use it now. But when we would go back into, actually, if I create another camera here, and this would be in perspective, we can start looking into how we see these pathways being generated. And I can see that maybe, you know, when I go really close, I don't see the definition that well. So that spline can be improved by just going into the spline and maybe set it to uniform and increase the amount to a lot, but that still doesn't solve it. So you can make the object smaller. It's probably too big where, you know, if I would be making it smaller, I can see the definition is a bit better. You see what the spline does with the sizing as well? Like it just grows, like we set it up with the spline. So with the spline wrap, I can actually go into that plane and increase the width. And then in that logo, I can set it to natural. And maybe made that logo even smaller. So you see the definition is getting much better on that spline. But then obviously you will have to accommodate for that. So I'm just gonna go into the spline and make it much narrower. So 0.5, maybe 0.1, and we are back. And I can see the definition is a little bit better. So closer you get, you're gonna see more of that. But essentially, if you're spreading it across that object, you make sure your spline is as good as it can be. You know, if you go like high up and if you go subdivided, you can see that this is actually quite good. So if I go top center, now obviously I am super high up. So I would need to actually I'm going to zero this out and then bring that spline in the center too, and then zoom in simply using zoom. I can have that spline highlighted and maybe change the axis center. So put it right in the middle and then center it out again. So now I have it center it out, and I'm going to zoom in, delete this camera, and I'm just going to zoom in just so I achieve same effect. And now I have much more definition in that spline, and I'm going to have to, again, adjust for the sizing. Maybe 0.05 would be enough, just so when I look at from that perspective, I don't see such a high raise. So yeah, something like that. Now, this is not it. Like, it's all cool, right? But you were like, Stefan, you know more. And I do. I actually gonna show you how we can control this even better. I change this to something like that. And we have a ramp. And we're gonna use something called ray switch. So we're gonna bring in ray switch. So Shift C, ray switch, bring it in. And ray switch is a node that can enable front and back, which is extremely powerful. So we can enable front and back and then go into color. And now I have that ramp in the front. So I go back to emission. So this is my front now. And you can see this back face color now, which could be anything you want. Or you can choose to create another ramp and go into back face color. But now you can mix it up, those colors, and you can do even a little bit of orange again, introduce. And now you have something that is inside and something that is outside. And you start creating immediately much more advanced glows than you would be able to achieve, you know, in After Effects and stuff like that. So this setup is so quick and easy, and you have different insides and outside. Now this is something that was used in that Apple logo, I think, and it creates really awesome glows. So I highly recommend to go into ray switch and look into like setting up your own gradients like that. So if I go outside of this again, I can see I can now kind of follow little details. I can create camera that is more compressed. So if I go into camera and I'm in a perspective mode and I go to 300 and I click on it, I see something much more compressed. So I could create just slight angles of what I'm trying to capture. And when I just go, I can see these little 3D ways. It's still kind of flat, but I can see a little bit, which I kind of like, and I've seen in a lot of the videos. And with this way, you can introduce even the depth of field, because you need perspective for this to kind of be able to navigate. And you can click here and then increase until you get that corner, and the rest is kind of in focus, but you get these glowy, watery, like, yeah, that's quite cool. I can start like if I render this quickly, and I think it renders really fast as well. So you get like awesome glows. Isn't that something? Now we can go into that material. Obviously, we have reflections here, but do we really need them? I don't know. And then because we use the emission, and do we really need to see the, you know, base? I don't think so. And then within that ground, we can control how much the light will travel, how much we will see of that ground, or we see like super thin lines, which we could then exaggerate with the use of bloom. So I can use bloom to kind of exaggerate that intensity of the bloom while still keeping the like thin line. So I have almost fiery effect when it comes to, you know, those crazy lines. This is so good. Yeah. So this creates something that you get to use, and you can use any logo on that, and you can start compositing into different structures and really start like spline madness. So anything you think of spline, like any object, you can start kind of using it for your projects and putting these materials on it with the ray switch. I really like it. So if I save this spline glow tutorial, you should have it soon. So I hope you enjoyed this, and I don't know what else I could do. It's like there's always more. Like if we look into those examples that we saw before, I'm gonna go Instagram history, 3 tabs, restore window. So we had that one. So this looks like a, you know, button capsule angled in 3D, if I think about it, but it creates rather nice shape. We have these. So this is how the light travels. We explained. It's very well done, subtle moves. It travels very well. It's really good. And then within the Apple event, we saw the inner glows, and this could be good. Oh, I love this. If the ground is actually liquidy, if we go like this, and I'm just gonna readjust the focus here. Okay, we're gonna chill on that focus distance, actually the aperture. I'm just gonna reduce that glow a bit. So if we have something like this, damn, so good. Then we can definitely, you know, even if you control height in the spline wrap, if you don't like the height, you can just simply use that middle point to kind of control this. And so that's good. Another control of like how you want to go about it. But yeah, if we, what I want to show, insides. Yeah, if we want to do liquid, maybe we can go into my C40 projects, liquid fields. So if I have the liquid fields here, and I have this displacer on a plane, so if I take this on this plane, I put a displacer. Actually, I know I need to put it on the ground. My apologies. And I need to make it like 0.05. And I need to make this, if I put ND and F, I need to make much more definition on that ground. So if I do 300 by 300, not enough, but I can make it much smaller. Zero 0.2. Okay, so now we're cooking 0.05. So we have like a liquid effect going through this, but like we want 0.01. We don't want to go through. I'm just going to make these much smaller, much more localized, and like go into the liquid effect. So if I go back to that camera, I can remove the bokeh for now. And I need to see more reflections. So here it was nice. I need to see more definition, definitely. So ground needs to be like 600 by 600. This doesn't help even more. And then the size of the displacer. Now I can bring the logo spline wrap a little bit up, just so it's sticking out. I can make these a little larger, and you get this kind of liquid effect within those splines. So we can even like use this in a way that, you know, obviously we would control this, but we can leave it for another video in a way that it would look good for this project. You know, I can control the capsules the way that it looks. It sort of manipulates the water there, and then have that angle be here, and control these there. Zero, 005. Spline wrap a little bit down. And then make it slightly and then you get that liquidy style effect. But like that needs more execution. If you're interested in that, you feel free to always let me know. Go into the comments and just request stuff, because I'm back. Okay, have a good one.